Hello, Sarah. So cool to have you on our little channel, especially compared to your amazing channel. I've watched so many of your videos. Thought, oh my
Oh,
God, that's so amazing. And also seen some of your improvisations, which are really great as well. Um,
oh.
so it's such an honor to have you here, and that's really cool. So I've always been curious about how you got into improvisation, and I'm gonna ask you some questions, and I think it will be really great to hear your answers.
Sure. Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Ooh, well, it's just ever present. Um, I don't really think of it as a separate thing. I don't even know if I'm that conscious of it. It's just a natural part of making music. Um, Concretely, I improvise a lot. I've done lots of improvisation concerts, projects, but it's also how part of how I compose. Um, I like to just improvise at home. Um, and in my teaching, I've taught improvisation a lot. So I worked for 11 years at a place called the SoundLab in Amsterdam, where I would give improvisation classes to large groups. Um, so yeah, it's always there. It's always fun. My first improvisation, I have no idea. I remember in high school, when I was more a flute player than a recorder player, we had a guy come in and do a workshop on jazz improvisation, which was really fun. It was very basic, playing over changes. Um, at the time, I had this idea that to be an improviser, to be a composer, it
Oh,
was some kind of like divine gift that certain people were blessed with. And I was like, oh, um, rather than just something you can learn and practice and enjoy. So that was enjoyable. In terms of recorder playing, it came very gradually. I was really into contemporary music. I always have been. Um, and we did more and more with that. Uh, duh, duh, duh. I guess when I was studying in Amsterdam, that's when I started doing more improvisation, and also in groups. It wasn't only alone. So where I really explored it was in the context of free improvisation, kind of contemporary techniques. In that sense, but also in folk music. I grew up playing folk, so we'd improvise solos or we'd just be jamming basically. Yeah, jamming for want of a better word. Um, and of course, it comes up in as a recorder player, it comes up in education, improvising in different styles, Renaissance divisions, Baroque ornaments, that kind of thing. So I was learning that alongside. So I guess in all of my musical life, all these varied things, there were elements of improvisation popping up all over the place.
right. And
Mm.
maybe did you realize earlier on that, I mean, you were improvising like in the folk context, for instance, but maybe you just didn't call it that, or
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew we were improvising. It just
oh,
wasn't a big deal, like, no, we're going to improvise.
yeah,
With, one person would have the tune, like, and they'd play that, and we'd be like, and um, in folk music, so we learnt everything by ear, and that made a huge difference. Learning to trust our ears as musicians rather than our eyes reading sheet music. So I would say learning, yeah, learning to use and trust my ears was probably the most important part of learning to improvise. Yeah, definitely. I would make I would have lessons with my recorder teacher. We'd go through improvisation stuff, and there we'd learn just just exercises and tricks. There's not way to improvise. So in the context of free improvisation, I think we'd think mostly about structure. Um, ways to structure an improvisation using cells and developing them, just trying different games to like ping pong sounds off one another. And then, yeah, we had many classes about using different musical languages. So, many classes on Baroque ornaments, that's improvisation. I followed lessons. I followed a course in like basic jazz improvisation, which then we had to perform. I remember doing a horrific rendition of Autumn Leaves, but it's good fun. You've got to do it. And then my job when I was teaching improvisation, we'd have trainings, which was hugely helpful, like teacher trainings, different ways of approaching it with movement, with text, with different themes, like in relations to different kinds of music, pop music, classical music. So yeah, there was a lot of training as well as just like doing it.
That's really interesting. It's such a
Mm.
diverse training also that you've had.
Yeah, but I think that fits naturally with the recorder. We play so many diverse kinds of music, and a lot of what I learned you can apply to other things. So yeah, I think it helps to just learn more about as many areas as you can. Mm. Well, there's a lot of ways as recorder players we're kind of encouraged to treat the score in a different way. Even from a sense of we can transpose and play in different keys, different clefs, different keys. That the score is, I don't want to say it's treated as optional, but it's a different entity than this like
Mm.
holy thing that must be completely perfectly reproduced or you're completely wrong. We're used to saying like a note with a cross above it and being like, oh, that can mean 100 things. Or we'll have a simple Renaissance line and have 20 ways in our head that we could ornament it. So yeah, because our repertoire is a little bit on the outskirts of these very creative places, when the performer and the composer was actually the same thing, which I think is an important part of it. It very much depends on the style. So free improvisation. I don't know if I necessarily. Okay, let me think. Free improvisation, it's just a lot of doing it, a lot of listening, and a lot of doing it, going and seeing other concerts. Because in free improv, there's a wide range. It can be very aggressive and noisy and dense. It can be very silent and sparse. We all have our own preferences, let's say. So listening to it as much as possible and just trying and trying and trying. Having these different musical games and exercises you can do can really help, but it's not always possible. So I found it really helpful to find friends to improvise with, and we just try it again and again. And then if you're improvising within a different musical language, like I've already mentioned, Renaissance divisions, Baroque ornamentation, you've just got to do it again and again. And I would say get a backing track, put that on, and just try and try and try. And you'll learn these patterns. It's being able to judge, if I start here, where do I end up? Do I end up on the beat that I want to be, or the note of the scale? In that sense, there's quite a lot of theory to learn, but it's about integrating it into your ears, really, your ears and your hands, learning these patterns. So how to practice it varies quite a lot depending on what you want, basically. Do you want to sound like you are improvising an authentic Renaissance diminution or an authentic jazz solo? Or do you want to construct your own piece of music from nothing? That the core of all of it is listen, 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 and do it, do it, do it. I think there's two things. One is that when I'm improvising, especially in a group, I try and only play if I really think it's going to contribute something, rather than just. When I'm improvising, I notice that sometimes I almost fall into the trap of not wanting to repeat myself or repeat things. I just want to try and come up with something new. oh, I played that already, I can't play it again. But then sometimes I play something that I really loved and I think it sounded great, but I'm like, oh, but I already did it. Let's try and think of something new. And I'd say one breakthrough moment was a few years ago. I was improvising with a cellist, Martin Voss, he's called, and electronics. And I was very much like, oh my gosh, I'm standing next to this great improviser and I've got to show what I can do, but I already played that in the rehearsal, so I can't repeat it now. And at a certain point, I let it go and I just played exactly what I thought would sound good. And it felt so good. And maybe it edged slightly into the realm of being cheesy, but it was like, like it felt amazing. The music had this big flow. So what am I trying to say? Maybe it's like at a certain point, don't overthink it. Like you're in your head thinking, oh, let's do this and this, but not that and that. And you just have to let it go and kind of trust it. And yeah, don't be afraid to play what really sounds good. I think part of it is maybe self-consciousness, like not wanting my musical colleagues to think, oh, she's just playing something she already played before. She's not really improvising. If I'm just like analysing my thoughts at the moment. In reality, I don't think anyone cares. And if something sounds really good, why not play it again? I mean, it's good to challenge yourself and to try and look for new things, but not just for the sake of it, I guess. And what I try and impart on my students as well is that, you know, if you improvise, if you can, or if you're comfortable in improvising, it's so much more comfortable on stage, because if something goes wrong, you make a mistake, you have this flexibility to move out of it and not be thrown. You know, if something goes wrong on stage, I can improvise around it and it's absolutely fine. I'm not walking a tightrope of I can't make mistakes or it's wrong. It just gives freedom on stage. Yeah, the SoundLab is it's super cool. It's situated in the Musiekenbouw A in Amsterdam. It's the education department of the concert hall. So the Musiekenbouw is a concert hall that really specializes in contemporary music, that has a wide range of programming. And in the SoundLab, we've got a range of 60 or 70 instruments created by sound artists, so they don't exist anywhere else. This means you can't practice them. Everyone starts at the same level. Let's say you don't have to read notes. And our workshop leaders lead group workshops, and we, over the course of 90 minutes usually, we improvise, compose and create a piece of music that the participants then rehearse and perform. It's aimed at children and adults. I'd say we mostly get high school classes, which is great, but we've had everyone from the bankers from the ABN AMRO who found it a big challenge to let go and be creative. Yeah, so it's great, and we a workshop typically has 3 sections. So we warm up, then there's discovery, experimentation, like kind of setting a structure and rehearsal, and then performance. So it's really through this whole open. Then and then you choose the sounds you want, and then you choose it and rehearse it and perform it with an evaluation at the end. So yeah, I worked there from 2011 to I actually just finished working there last year. It was the best job on the planet. For concerts, I've got a couple coming up on 25th of February, doing a concert in Amsterdam that will be broadcast on Vrije Geluiden, which is Dutch Radio 4. that's a profile of me as a composer who performs my own work. But of course, I'll be doing some improvisation based stuff there. Maybe it's interesting to talk about I play in a band called Jerboah, and we all have different backgrounds. There's two guys who come from a jazz background, drums and guitar, and then me and the bassist, who's actually a recorder player but playing the bass on an iwi, come from a classical background, but we use it's a lot of improvisation as well. Um, so that's fun to kind of have these different backgrounds coming together. And this contemporary improvisation, jazz improvisation. We also play folk music in our own time, all coming together. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
super cool. Yeah, I've
yeah.
heard some of your tracks. They're really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good fun. We just recorded our album, so that's in process at the moment. It's going to come out at some point. Thank you very much.